Do you find yourself with more scraps than you know what to do with? Well, today we're going to be making use of some of those fabric scraps with a fun and practical Quilt-As-You-Go sewing project. And the best part, you don't need a pattern for this one. You just need your creativity and a handful of scraps. Now this project is perfect for quilters of all levels, from beginners to experienced, and it's a wonderful way to experiment with different colour combinations and fabric patterns, making it truly unique. This is a fun and simple project, so let's get started. Now the scraps that I'm using today were sent to us from Cotton Cuts. Now we're going to be part of their latest puzzle mystery quilt with the Wild West theme, and these were scraps that match the dusty rose colourway that we chose. Now if you want to know more about this, there will be a link in the description field below, but essentially it is a subscription based project where you receive pre-cut fabrics and instructions each month for 10 months, and you assemble the pieces like a puzzle, and in the final month you get the key to complete a beautiful quilt top. So the first thing we need to do is cut these scraps, and essentially you want to cut strips that measure 6.5 inches in height. Now the width doesn't really matter too much, although I suggest not going any less than 1 inch. Mine measured anywhere between 1 inch to 2 3/4. So I have my pieces cut, and the next thing we need to do is cut a piece of backing fabric and a piece of batting that both measure about 20 inches by 19 inches, which I've already done, as you can see here. And you'll also notice that I've drawn some lines on the batting. So what we need to do is find the centre. So I've folded the batting in half and I made a crease. And then I folded it in this way and made another crease. And then I made a mark in the middle. And then because my fabric pieces measure 6.5, I measured 3 1/4 from the centre and I drew a line. And I did the same on the other side. This is really just to give us a guide for when we're sewing the scraps on, so that everything lines up and we don't veer off too much. Now this part is purely optional, but I like to use a fabric adhesive spray like this one to keep the batting and the backing together, but it will work without it, so don't feel you have to go out and spend money on this. I made the first 3 without using any spray. But if you have some adhesive spray, then all you need to do is spray the batting with a small amount, then smooth everything down. I also like to give it a press as well, just to make sure everything's nice and smooth. Now the fun part begins. If you haven't guessed already, this is going to be a placemat, and I'm really just playing around with these strips at this point to get a basic idea of how I want it to look and how many pieces I will need. And I'll probably come back and add more after I've sewn the first lot down, as the seams will make these all smaller, but the goal is to get around 18 inches across. And once I get the look that I want, I will usually take a photo with my iPhone so that I don't forget how it looks, and then I'll remove the pieces. So I'll take the first piece and lay it down and line it up nicely, and then I'll place the second piece over the top and sew along with the 1/4 inch seam. I always like to press the strips open before adding the next one, but just don't go too heavy-handed here, or it could stretch the batting. Now you can just finger press the seam open or use one of those handy roller gadgets, but I find it just as easy to press it open with the iron. So now I can add the next piece, and I'll do exactly the same thing. Just place it on top of the other piece and sew with a 1/4 inch seam. Now if you're using a friction pen like me, you need to be careful on how you use your iron, as it will remove the marks you made, which is exactly what happened to me, so I had to draw them on again. And now you just need to continue adding more strips until you get close to the edge, then flip the piece around and start from the other direction, and just repeat the same process until you get close to the edge. And once that is done, I'm going to iron the back and check everything is looking okay. And then I will measure the width, and ideally I want it to be at least 18 inches, plus a little extra, as we will be trimming this back. At this point my quilted piece only measured 15.5 inches, so I'm going to add a couple more pieces and sew those on. Okay, so as you can see, I've sewn all of the pieces on, and despite my best efforts, it's still veered off. However, it will all come good in the end, so don't panic if this happens to you. Obviously, you don't want it to be too crooked, but if it looks something like mine, it will still work okay. Now next I'm going to sew on some sashing pieces, and these measure 1.5 by about 19 inches. We will be trimming this back, so as long as it's the same width of your fabric pieces, you should be fine. And once it's sewn on, I just press it open. Now we're ready to add some border pieces, and you can do this in one of two ways. You can use a full 2.5-inch strip like this one here, or if you're like me and you don't have a full strip of anything in your colours, you can just join some pieces together and that will make a nice border. So I've sewn all those pieces together, and now I'm going to place that over the sashing, and I'll sew along with a 1/4-inch seam, and I'll do exactly the same with the other side. Now that the borders are attached, I'm going to trim my piece, so I'll line up my ruler along the seam line and then trim that back. And then I'll repeat that on the other end, and then I'm going to trim along the long sides. Just take your time with it, and if it's a bit wonky, just tug at the edges if you need to in order to get everything straight. And now I'm going to measure it to see if it's the size I want, and I've decided it's a little too long, so I'm going to trim a bit more off each end, and I ended up taking about 1/4 inch off each side. And now we're ready to add our binding, and in hindsight I wish I'd used this colour for my backing. It would have looked so much nicer than the green, but there's no going back now. Plus I didn't find the pink fabric hidden away in my stash until I was trying to find some fabric for the binding. So the binding pieces I have here measure 2¼ inches by the width of the fabric, and I'm going to trim off the selvages of each of these pieces and sew them together so that they form one long strip. And then I'm going to sew the binding on, and if you need to know how to do this, we have a step-by-step video on how to sew binding onto placemats, and I'll put a link to that in the description field below. So there you have it. My placemat is done, and I think it came out great. And as I said, I wasn't really happy with the green on the back, but I think it looks alright now that the binding is on. And here are a few of the other ones that I made. So for the first one that I made, I selected scraps of yellow, orange, brown and black, and I had enough of the orange fabric for the borders, the backing and the binding. I think this is my favourite. I like how the colours came together. For this one I selected purples and blues and a rather nice scrap of paisley. Now when I look at it now, I wish I had added a piece of the paisley to the other end, but hindsight is a wonderful thing. Now for this one I made the border in purple and the backing is also in purple, and I added a dark blue binding which I think finished it off nicely. Now my only issue with the purple one is that I forgot to change the bobbin thread to match the backing fabric, so it stands out instead of blending nicely into the back. But hey, no one's going to see the back but me. This one is made from scraps of Christmas fabrics that I had left over from previous Christmas projects. Now these placemats would make great stocking stuffers, so I'll be making more of these for Christmas presents this year. So thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe, and don't forget that the step-by-step written instructions are over on the website alandacraft.com.